Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Eccentric Mind Podcast with your host, George Hernandez. Thank you guys so much for tuning in today. So, we've done a little bit of discussing. I've pretty much brought up, excuse me while I'm moving this camera. We've talked a lot. I've been speaking, researching about alcohol, the consumption of alcohol, how I'll be hitting 1,000 days sober from alcohol in November, even though I did have a little, like the tiniest sip in Indiana. It's interesting. I've had questions in the past of why I decided to stop drinking alcohol, and typically the questions came in a form of, how could you possibly stop? Like, what's wrong with you? Or what happened to you? Were you some form of addict? Were you a alcoholic? Was there a specific incident that led you to stop drinking alcohol? And it's not really that. I just kind of wanted to provide a little bit of perspective as to why I stopped consuming alcohol, and maybe this can help somebody else who's also in the stages where there's a bit of a gap where they don't necessarily enjoy consuming alcohol. There's not much of a enjoyment that comes with it. They don't like how they feel afterwards, but they've yet been able to recollect, be conscious of, or be aware of why they should stop drinking it in the first place. So I've already discussed a whole lot of information and research about the topic of why you shouldn't be consuming alcohol, or at least be aware about what it is that you're doing to yourself once you consume alcohol. That podcast episode will be linked up in the description below if you guys want to watch and listen to that one. It's pretty interesting. It's pretty scary too. Just the effects as to what happens to your kidneys, to your liver, to your organs, to your brain, to your body, and just how alcohol is and how it serves you. So when I originally started, my first beer I had my first beer when I was 14 years old. Now, did I like beer? Absolutely not. I did not like it at all. I remember having sips of it when I was pretty young too, maybe like 7, 8, 9 years old, just trying a little sip from my dad's beer. And I never liked it. But I remember not finishing that beer for the first time. And there was this thing that as I aged, I wanted to be a part of my brother's stories. I wanted to be a part of my dad's stories because they had these really funny, very interesting time frames where they would get drunk and they would have a great time and they would have all these memories and they would all be laughing together. And part of me just wanted to be involved in those stories because I was the youngest kid in the family. I was never really able to be a part of those memories. So drinking felt as though I can be a part of those memories if I was able to drink. So as a, young adolescent kid, 12 to 14, 15, I didn't want to be that age specifically. I wanted to be the age of drinking so that way I can start making those types of memories with my older brothers and my family and just be a part of those moments. Now, upon that time frame, once I was finally able to start drinking, I would go to like high school parties and have a couple beers, like 17, 18 years old, maybe one or two. And even then, it felt as though it was doing something wrong, and there was always this applied guilt that I would have. Obviously, just you're not supposed to be drinking at that age, so I just always had that guilt, and I didn't like how it felt. But I did it anyway. And, I was 17, I was 18, right? Then there came a time where I think for the first time I got really drunk at a party of some sort. I think it was a baby shower or something. And I remember vividly that I was just being an asshole. And I was being a total piece of crap. And I remember I was aware of it. I was aware of what I was saying. I was aware of what I was doing. But I had the excuse of, oh, I'm sorry, I was drinking. Oh, I'm sorry, I was drunk. I couldn't comprehend it. I didn't know what I was saying. And that is just so not cool. Granted, I think I was 19 at the time, 20 years old maybe. So I really wasn't not even. I think I was 18 or 19 years old. So I wasn't as self-aware at that time. I was still very much caught up in my low self-esteem, low confidence. And that's where I began to like liquid courage in a way, because I was able to enact a version of myself that I couldn't while I was sober. And weirdly, even though I liked the courage, I didn't like who I was when I was drunk, because I was just more arrogant, way more arrogant. It's crazy. That's arrogance. That's good to know. Much cockier, much more on a pedestal than I normally would be. And it's because the alcohol was making that happen. It wasn't because I myself was a confident individual. And I like to think that you already are capable of being confident and competent and courageous aside from being drunk. You are already that source to be able to do those things. But for me specifically, I was just enacting a persona that I thought was who I wanted to be. And I just didn't like that. I didn't like how arrogant I was. I didn't like how I treated certain people. I didn't like what I was saying. And I didn't like the idea that I was just excusing myself and being able to say the things that I wanted to say, even though they were hurtful. But I had the get out of jail free card, which was, I'm sorry, I was drunk. I didn't know what I was doing. Bullshit. So that happened once or twice. I think the first time I blacked out, it was my graduation party from high school. I think I was 19, or I think I was still 18 around that time, or 19, something along the lines of that. And that was the one and only time I ever got blackout drunk. I didn't throw up. I didn't have a hangover. Nothing necessarily harmed me. I felt great. I didn't feel a headache or dehydrated or anything along the lines of that when I was that age. I just never had a hangover, fortunately. Then, as I began to lose weight, this is where a lot of the things started to change. So I grew really into counting calories for a long period of time. That was just the thing that I did. And throughout that time period, I remember still cranking down a couple beers, but it was more so Michelob Ultras, it was Coronas, it was Pacificos, but it was still aligned with being able to make progress for my weight loss goals, right? But during that time frame, I still remember I never necessarily craved alcohol. It wasn't something that I was, I'm really, really hunting for a beer right now. It was more so, this would be nice to have. And even when I would drink it at that time frame, it didn't feel worth the amount of calories that I would consume unless it was at the end of the day. But I also remember how my stomach felt after drinking it. But around that time frame when I was like 21, I wasn't paying too much attention to my gut health around the time. So I was just like, whatever. I guess I'm just not used to it because I eat so healthy. Even though I was just eating like protein shakes and just had crazy acne. So I lose 63 pounds and I'm in the best shape of my life and things are great. I'm on high altitude. I start getting invited to more parties and I realize that I don't enjoy being around the crowd of alcohol. I don't enjoy being the person that's sober because I was only giving myself a shot, 2 shots at a time. Yeah. Dude, it's crazy. It's crazy. So yeah, I would give myself maybe a shot, 2 shots at a time. And that's crazy. I just remembered that. I would give myself a shot or 2 shots at a time. But there was this disconnect where I would drink a little bit, but I still wouldn't have fun around the people that I was hanging out with. Because, well, they drink to get drunk. I just drank socially. Because I was also watching out for my health and trying to get into leaner shape. So there's always that component to it. And throughout that time frame, I just became very self-aware that I don't necessarily like being around drunk people all the time. And I actually genuinely enjoy engaging and having conversation with people that aren't drunk. It's cool to have a social drink every once in a while, but for some reason, even the people that I was hanging around, they weren't trying to have conversation. They were just trying to get drunk. It was their weekend, you know? So I was a little self-aware of that. But then there was one specific event where I had just one shot. The next day, though, I went to the gym to have a glute and hamstrings workout. I still remember being on the hip thrust machine and thinking to myself, I can't push as hard as I normally would. You know, I feel a little dehydrated. For some reason, my stomach hurts. My head is killing me a little bit. Why can't I train the way that I normally train on any given Sunday? So it was weird to me. Then I had a little bit of a realization that maybe it's just the alcohol, and maybe I should just stop drinking alcohol altogether. And from that on, I literally just stopped drinking alcohol. I just decided, okay, I'm going to stop drinking alcohol. And throughout that time frame, it's now going to be 1,000 days really soon. I've learned a lot, but I think the thing that's stood out to me the most is that I don't spend too much money on going out and having a couple beers. I don't find myself in any sticky situations because there's no reason to stay at a bar for that long because all I'm doing is drinking water. And I don't necessarily find myself enjoying being in the company of drunk people. No judgment whatsoever. I just don't find enjoyment in that. So there's more of a reason to leave and just be in bed by 10 p.m. the next day. So that means there's potentially no issues. There's potentially there's no fights. There's no crazy memories. There's no going home with the specific girl. Like, there's none of that. It's just being intentional with what it is that I'm doing. And given the fact that it's not even that I don't allow myself to do those things. I just genuinely don't want to do those things. So as a result, I get to focus more on things like this, where I can focus on my podcast. I know that the next Sunday or the day after I won't be hungover, so I will have the energy and the focus and the attention to be able to work on the thing that I'm working on and stay consistent and diligent in the process. I also noticed that my overall health has just skyrocketed and just improved. My consistency, my focus, my attention, my discipline. Yeah, it originally started as a means to improve upon, it wasn't even a means to improve upon my overall health. It was so that way I can train better. It was so that way I never have to worry about the extra calories on the scale. I never have to worry about, am I damaging my results from what I'm doing? Because, well, instead of having a beer, I would just have a glass of water at a bar. Instead of a beer, I would just have a glass of water at a restaurant or whatever it may be. Not only that, I'm not losing progress and I'm not spending money, which allows me to have more attention and more focus on the things that I'm actually pursuing and actually passionate about. So it's not necessarily a loss. It's actually a win and a win and a win. So yeah, that's literally the main reason as to why I stopped drinking alcohol, because I noticed there was a gap. There was a gap between the people that I enjoyed speaking to. There was a gap when it came to my own specific goals and wants and desires, to where it was easier to give up something so that way I can refine and reinforce myself. But it was also a means to heighten, improve upon my focus levels, but also it literally gave me a genuine perspective shift to whom I enjoy being around, who I like talking to, and who I feel safe around. Because I think the reason I didn't like drinking too was just it was a voluntary choice to be unsafe with the people that you're around. If you think about it, people are literally inhibiting their brain regions, what's going on in their head, and they're making irrational, illogical decisions on a regular basis because they're literally inhibiting their mind and their brain. So if you're around those types of people, people are going to start saying things that they don't mean. People are going to start acting in a certain way that they don't mean. People are going to make poor decisions, unsafe decisions, and more irresponsible choices that can potentially harm you. And if you yourself are also inhibited, if you yourself have been drinking and aren't necessarily safe under those conditions, there's likely a chance that you're going to get harmed. And I pray and hope that never happens to you, but I just prefer being on the odds of safety. I prefer being on the odds of what it is that I actually enjoy being around. I just didn't like being around people that couldn't hold a conversation with me because they were drunk. And that to me isn't fun. It's not fun seeing people that you love be unable to walk. It's not fun being able to see them slur on their words, because in some ways you don't see somebody that's drunk, you see somebody that's running away from their life. You see somebody that's trying to swallow some form of pain that they can't necessarily comprehend or recollect or come across. And once you become that self-aware about other people, it's not fun to be around. It's pretty heavy hitting. And maybe it's not always that way, but I would prefer not always having to be around that type of environment. I would prefer something that's actually going to make me feel inspired and motivated to continuously pursue the things that I'm doing on a regular basis. And that's not any forms of judgment. Everybody has their choice and their own free will. And that's all up to you. We all make the decisions that we desire to make, and we make best with what we have, with our given circumstances and our specific outcomes and decisions. However, we also have the choice of what not to do. And I just choose not to be around that specific environment, or at least, if I am, try to enjoy it as much as I could. Try not to overthink it. Yeah, that's one of the main reasons why I stopped, is because, it's just a win-win in my case. This is all dependent on what you value as a person yourself. If you're somebody that's high achieving and wants to make a dent in the world, then drinking every weekend and only waiting for the weekend probably isn't going to work out for you, because you're going to be drunk Sunday morning and you're going to be unavailable to work on the things that you aspire to obtain. But if you're somebody who's looking forward to being with your friends on the weekend, and you're not necessarily working on something, but you appreciate your life, you're grateful, you enjoy being around your friends, and you're not only able to enjoy yourselves while drinking, but able to enjoy yourselves while you don't drink, that's just a very good friendship. I've noticed a lot of that, where people don't necessarily have friends, they have drinking partners, and the only time they hang out with people or have conversations is with a beer right in front of them. That's unfortunate. But yeah, that's just, I don't want drinking buddies. I want genuine, real relationships. I don't want people who I could only speak to about the real things going on in my life while I'm intoxicated. I want people to inspire me, make me feel uplifted, and vice versa. I'd want to be able to provide that for somebody else, and just be more open and clairvoyant and aware and genuinely here with you, as opposed to me being inhibited by a liquid that damages my brain and body. And I think this is just a rare insight. I think I'm more myself when I'm sober than when I'm drunk. And a lot of these realizations for me came across at a very young age, and I didn't know necessarily how to comprehend them. But I'm 1000% happy and gratified and satisfied with my decision to quit drinking alcohol. And I don't know, maybe things will change. Maybe the more that I age and the more that I mature and the more I find other people, or find people that are also on the same sort of path themselves, and they can not take themselves so seriously and be able to have a kickback and be able to have a sip of wine or a sip of champagne or have a beer or really have a nice sip of tequila or whatever it is, then maybe that'll be the time. However, at this specific time, I don't necessarily intend on drinking alcohol again, even though I'll tell you a funny story. So, I've been sober for a very long time, very close to 3 overall years sober from alcohol, which feels amazing to say. However, so I'm in Indiana for a business trip or a work trip, and I go out to have dinner with a specific individual who happens to be high up in the business. Very powerful man, very interesting man. I'm with him and I'm with my supervisor. My supervisor and I have dinner with this gentleman. So we're sitting down on a table of this beautiful restaurant going on. It's got the ambiance. It's a Mexican restaurant. There's good music. The environment is beautiful. The lights are just amazing. The higher up, the boss, the big head honcho, gets up and he goes to the bar. He comes back and he's a little disappointed because he wanted a tequila, but because he wasn't a member, he wasn't allowed to have the tequila that he wanted. So when he asked for the next tequila that is available, he noticed that that tequila specifically tastes like piss. So he doesn't want that one. Sooner or later, they start talking. The waitress comes over. They start having a conversation. The gentleman shows his tequila collection to the woman. She's amazed. She's wowed. We get our dinner right afterwards. We have a good dinner. Right when we're getting ready to pay, a gentleman, about 30 minutes after, a gentleman comes up to our table and he has this beautiful, beautiful bottle inside of his hand. Just this beautiful bottle. It's clear. The liquid inside is just very clear, a little yellow, and it's just remarkable bottle. He comes up and he says, "Hey, I just drove anywhere between 30 to 45 minutes to be able to get here so that way I can give you guys a shot. You know, we heard a little bit that you were interested in having this tequila. I happen to have it at home. Here we go." The man has 3 glasses with him. He starts pouring it for the higher up. He starts pouring one for the supervisor. Then he turns over to me and he asks, "Are you 21?" To me, right then and there, I'm standing still on my pedestal of no drinking. I tell him, "No, I don't drink." He says, "Really?" And I say, "Yeah, I'm not going to go ahead and drink." And the moment I said that, I felt this pit right in the middle of my stomach. And it was twirling and it was twirling, and it was pretty much my head and my mind and my spirit and my soul and my heart and my stomach all telling me, "You're going to regret not having this sip of tequila. Like, you're going to regret it, George. The moment it's gone, the moment you can't have it anymore, you're going to regret not doing it." And I think about this. To finish off the story, I get really curious, just the way I am, and I'm intrigued. Just give me a small sip, and that's what we all get. We get this tiny sip, and I had the first sip of alcohol that I've had in, I don't even know how many days, maybe like 950 days, 960 days, something like that. And it was amazing tequila. It just tasted great, and it was smooth, and I literally got like tipsy from that one sip. Call me a lightweight, if you will. But the moral of that story is that for a long period of time, I never found a specific event that was high enough, grand enough, big enough to get me to have a sip of alcohol, to have a beer, to have a shot, to have alcohol in and of itself. Like, I've never found a moment where I was like, okay, that equates me having a shot. That equates me having a beer. And that was the first moment that I've ever had from being sober on alcohol where I was like, okay, let's have this. Because it was something I won't forget. It's a story now, you know? So I guess I'm searching for more of those moments specifically where, okay, this is the right time to have, this is the moment to break my consistency streak right here. And I don't regret it. And I actually very much enjoy that moment, and I was very grateful to be able to have that. And it's just something that I'll always carry with me, you know? I don't know what that bottle was, but afterwards, the higher up was telling me that's a $200 shot that you just had right now. I was like, that's interesting. Yeah, so that's pretty much it. That's the reason why I stopped drinking alcohol. If you're in that specific moment yourself where you're starting to become self-aware, maybe more self-reflective on the fact that you're not necessarily enjoying the company that you're around because they're all drinking alcohol and you yourself aren't necessarily enjoying it yourself, I would recommend just stopping it altogether, because you start to see so much more once you stop consuming alcohol. And you see people's reactions. You start identifying what it is that you value. You start figuring out, based on conversations while you're sober and somebody else is drunk, how some people feel about you. You start picking up on a lot of specific things. And it's interesting. It's powerful. And I don't think anybody will regret stopping drinking alcohol, because the positives that you gain do not compare to the positives that you lose, which is, the memories. But I think about it, if you get drunk every weekend, or if you just go out and you get drunk, you're going to forget what happened. So what's the purpose of going and getting drunk if you're going to forget that memory? It's just a perspective that you can have with you. And yeah, that's pretty much it. This has been the Eccentric Mind Podcast with George Hernandez. I appreciate you very much for listening. If this one stuck to you, if this one spoke to you in any sort of way, feel free to share it with somebody else who's also dealing with the exact same process themselves. And I hope to see you in the next episode. I'll catch you.